Hello, and welcome to Pivotal Moments HQ, a podcast sharing, exploring, and celebrating stories of change through mindset and wellness and the impact on relationships. We are all agents of change and have the power to pivot at any point, at any time. I'm your host, Siria Gutierrez, along with my co-host, Melissa Robena. On this episode, we discuss what it means to be in this post-pandemic mode, this PPM. We talk about how we are each dealing with the emotional and physical changes in this PPM. We discuss social interactions and respecting and holding your own boundaries.
So I really wanted to talk about transitioning out of pandemic mode. And I think the reason why this topic kind of surfaced for me is I was reading an article about how one large investment firm was basically telling all of its employees who had been working remotely during the pandemic that they had until Labor Day to come back to work, like the physical office, or basically find a new job. And it made me start to think about, just the different transitionings and the different comfort levels people are experiencing as, dare I say, things are returning to quote unquote normal or whatever that looks like. So to me, it's like, can you really even enforce that upon people?
Can you enforce it on people? I don't know that I think technically you can. You can enforce it on people. Should you enforce it on people? I think that's the better question, because of the fact that people know that they don't have to be in that specific space or even work within those specific traditional hours in order to do what needs to get done. And so right now there's a huge migration of people leaving and finding better work or leaving professions altogether. And I think that was one of I'm going to call it a gift of the pandemic, that people woke up and decided, you know what, this isn't worth it. I want something more or better for myself, and that's okay.
Do you think that this same level of self-awareness or self-exploration is going to continue as, restrictions are lifted and this pandemic survival mode is kind of subsides?
I think I don't know so much about the restrictions, but I think the flexibility that people want and know that they can have, I think that that's what's going to be a key thing for a lot of people.
Well, I know, speaking for you and a few other people that I've talked to that have worked successfully remotely, how do you go back to a place where, like, as soon as you step in the door, you just feel stifled of creativity? I think you had even mentioned how you've really enjoyed being able to, litigate outside of the courthouse. How does it feel having to go back? Because you just went back for the first time.
I did just go back to the courthouse. It was a little bit bittersweet. It was like, okay, I have to do this. But then it was also, I get to do this. I get to go down to the courthouse. We'll see how the lines are. We'll see how the vibe is. And it was super quiet. I didn't wear a suit because at this point I'm like, I don't think I'll ever wear a suit again unless I absolutely have to. But I wore like a really nice dress that always makes me feel really confident. And it was a familiar place, and it was nice to have that engagement with the judge, which I don't think that I was having as much during the pandemic. Yeah, you would see them on video conference, but you didn't get to like chit chat with people. You didn't get to do any of that stuff. And, there wasn't anybody in the elevators going up with us or anything like that. So that was different, but it was nice because it was something that I felt made sense to go in person. Now, for some of these other things that they want us to go down in person, it's like, this is stupid. It's taking me an hour round trip to get to the courthouse, depending on traffic, and I'm here for a 5-minute conference. Like, this is stupid. Don't do this to me. I don't want to do that. You don't want me to do that, right? Like, and even for the clients, I think that that's a big part of this flexibility part, that as we go into this new phase of our post-pandemic life, is that flexibility, that we really do want to keep it. And some people have now had it for the first time and they don't want to give it up. I know I certainly don't want to give it up, knowing that I can go to the gym, work out, show up on video conference at 9:00 and not have to rush through my morning. Like, what a gift.
That really is a gift. It really is. And I just think of the emotional component. I feel like once I got my vaccination that because prior to the, post-pandemic lifestyle, I mean, we're still kind of seeing what that looks like, but I was living in fear, absolute fear that I was going to get it. And because, I see my grandparent, here often, I would, help her with food, that what if I gave it to her? So I was living in fear. And I feel like this post-pandemic life, like I'm slowly starting to live life the way that I was. I still practice, social distancing, I still wash my hands a ton, but that emotional weight that I was carrying around with me has subsided. And not that it's gone completely, because, of course, when you're listening to the news, you hear of all these different variants that are more contagious and deadly than the original strain.
Pro tip, don't listen to the news. Go on.
But I mean, it's, and I try not to get bogged down with that. But I mean, for me, I noticed this shift. And I know in previous episodes, I talked about being in a depression because I was, socially distancing myself. But I learned that socially distancing doesn't mean social isolation. And that really just fed my depression. So when I'm looking at, when we're talking about transitioning out of that pandemic mode, how can I go back and maybe even look at the different relationships that I had with friends, colleagues, many of which I was terrible. I'm going to admit it. I was terrible about nurturing. I didn't call or text hardly anyone. And I'd like to be able to switch that, because I realized during the pandemic that despite being an introvert, I do enjoy relationships from time to time.
Well, relationships are important to you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you want 20 close friends. It might just be a couple of friends, and that's okay too. And I think people learning those different things about themselves of, hey, you know what, I really do miss being around groups of people, or, you know what, these groups of people, they really drained me. And I'm actually glad that those events weren't going on anymore, right? I think that there was a lot of opportunity for people to explore those different aspects of themselves more than anything. But now, we're going into this post-pandemic life, post-pandemic world. What do we want to call it? Post-pandemic something. You said something with an M. Post-pandemic mode, the PPM. So as we go into this PPM, post-pandemic mode, there are some basic things that you have to consider, right? Especially, different parts of the country have done it in different ways. We have been more social basically since June of last year. We had the ability to do that with some restrictions, but just going with the basics, masks and hand sanitizers. Are you still doing masks when you go to the grocery store? Are you even going to the grocery store?
I'm telling you, like, once I got the vaccine, I was like balls to the wall. I was like, I'm doing all the things that I had been putting off. So yeah, I've been to the gym. I've been to the grocery store. I still carry a mask with me though, because I know that private businesses can still require you to bring a mask. And I also want to be respectful, because there are still some people that don't hug. They might go out and they'll wear a mask. And I just want to be respectful of their boundaries. What about you?
Agreed. So for the masks, I still have them with me. But last night we went to the grocery store and Matt only saw one mask. He's like, oh no, we don't have enough masks. It's like, we're fine. We're both fully vaccinated. Like, I'm comfortable with it. Let's just go do the thing. And it's so hot right now in Las Vegas. Like, the last thing I want to do again is cover up my face that way when it's already super sweaty. But I still have like my hand sanitizer. We're still doing that every single time we get in and out of the car. And so, that's something that we're going to continue to do. One of the things, if you have not been outside and socialized, that may be new to you and has been new to a lot of people, is when you go to restaurants. Restaurants are a little bit different. So if you're going to they may give you a paper menu for them to recycle, but a lot of them switched over to the QRC codes. So you can just scan that bullshit and be like,
I
boom.
hate that. I feel like it's such an inconvenience. I'd rather you just give me the damn menus and just put hand sanitizer on the table so that I can wash my hands afterwards.
But there's no guarantee you're going to do it. And I think what's nice about the scanning ability is that it's the environmentalist in me is like, don't print out menus ever again, and don't have them laminated like ever again. Why would you do any of that?
No, I agree with the environmental aspect, but you can't always just assume that everybody knows how. What about the different demographics, like the baby boomers or even my grandmother's generation? They're not going to really understand QR codes. Or what if you're in a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi, because it needs to be able to have Wi-Fi to pull information from the site. I just think, you have to think of ways to find, maybe better ways to be more inclusive of the different demographics that you're serving.
And I think you can still have that option of having the paper menu, doing things like that. But it's interesting that you bring that up, because at my audition for a play that I went out to, I did not get cast or anything, but I had so much fun going. Part of what they had was this QRC code for you to scan to fill out your basic information. And it took you to a Google Doc. I was like, oh, okay, that was great, except for the fact that my internet was not working. So at some point I broke down and was like, can you please give me your Wi-Fi password, because I can't do it. And they were accommodating, but it was interesting because even they were self-aware enough to know, hey, there might be people who don't have it. So for some of the older actors that were coming out, they actually handed them iPads and were like, here you go. You can fill this out there. And I was like, can I get that? Because my phone's not working right now.
But I think that brings light on the fact that even businesses will have to adapt to how they service their customers. So if you're going to have these QR codes, then maybe you offer free Wi-Fi as opposed to, having to enter passwords and all that crap. But just in terms of like how they operate. But I think too, when we talk about transitioning, I mean, I know you're a lot more social than I am. And I think that really boils down to the comfort level that people have. I mean, I work for a consulting firm, and we used to deliver all of our trainings in person, and, we've moved them to virtual, but there are still people whose registrations we still have on hold because they're like, I'm going to hold out until you're offering an in-person, because there's just some people that are really adamant about in-person, and others are like, I will never do in-person training again.
I mean, all the coaching stuff that I'm doing, they have a survey at the end of every single training. And it's like, would you do this again online? Would you do it in person? A combination of the two. And for me, it's like, well, if the opportunity had come up to go in person, I would have liked that experience. But at the same time, the convenience of being able to do it from, basically here, not having to travel, not having to worry about what am I going to eat? What am I going to wear? All of those things. Like, I don't know that I would want to right away go to an in-person training like that.
Well, you also have to trust that the vendor, whoever is hosting this event, is abiding by, maybe CDC guidelines in terms of, how to host events and stuff. But it comes down to comfort level. I mean, we can follow all the CDC guidelines we want, especially with the consulting company, but there's some people that are just like, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm. And just knowing that there's still going to be a range of comfort for people. And I think that that's okay. We just have to be aware of that, and also be, like you said, respectful of what are other people's boundaries. Because I think this one dovetails nicely into, well, what do you do when you meet up with that friend that you haven't seen in a while? How do you do this? I mean, are we shaking hands? Are we hugging? Like, what's...
Well, you and I have a mutual friend, Jen, as we like.
The Jen, Professor
Poppy.
Yes.
And she is very respectful. Now, she was going through the pandemic, living life as if COVID wasn't a thing. And so I really did, I'm just speaking for myself. I limited my interactions with her. But after I think I maybe got my first shot, I don't know if I was fully vaccinated, I ended up going out to dinner with her. And I think you had said that she did this with you as well, which is she greeted us with the mask. Mm-hmm. And then if we were comfortable and say, it's okay, you don't have to have a mask, then she would take it off. But I mean, the fact that she knew where we stood shows that she respected our boundaries and our comfort level and met us where we were. And I really appreciated her for that.
And that's something that I've been doing as well when I go meet my clients, since I'm a virtual office right now, but I still have to have things where my clients are signing documents. I've gone to their homes and I've gone in wearing the mask and then just asked. And some of them were like, oh no, you're fine, we've all had it. And others were like, no, you know what, my kid hasn't been vaccinated yet, so I'd be more comfortable with the mask on. Like, no problem. Like, I don't have a problem with abiding by other people's wishes. Same thing with the hugging or handshakes. Like, it's just going to depend on what people are comfortable with. I'm a hugger, And so I like doing that, but I'm not going to force that on somebody who's not comfortable.
It's interesting that that COVID, or, you know, these pandemic protocols kind of surfaced these, dare I say it, not boundary, but like physical, I guess boundaries is the right word, but just like respectful boundaries. Like, you know, if you are a hugger, like, I'm going to respect your boundaries if you don't want to hug. Why did it take the pandemic for people to be more aware that people might have personal space issues, or, you know, these hygiene protocols? Why are we telling people how to wash their hands?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Why did take the pandemic for that? I don't know, because I think gregariousness and that kind of personality is more glorified in some ways. And so there was something before the pandemic, like, oh, like, you don't want to hug, like, that's kind of weird, like, or you don't want to shake hands. Like, I had a colleague who's an Orthodox Jew, like, he doesn't shake hands with women. And so I was like, well, that's, I guess, cultural, but also weird because we're colleagues, like, you know. But it's like you start getting into your head about it, and now it's like, well, it doesn't even matter. It's just, I don't want to touch other people. Like, that's fine.
Do you think that that's something that's going to stay around for a little bit, or for the rest of our lifetime, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think slowly you're going to get back to people being comfortable in doing things maybe the way that they're most comfortable with. So maybe that is greeting people with handshakes, or in Latino culture, you know,
like the cheek kiss.
The kiss, you know, a little besito here. Like, you can do that kind of a thing. But it's really still going to depend, I think, on the person and the group too, because if you see that people are not hugging or people are not shaking hands, you're going to follow suit. That's just the way groups work.
Well, I feel like as we're transitioning out of this pandemic mode, or post-pandemic mode, the PPM, I feel like I'm able to vocalize when I'm not feeling comfortable in a situation. And I don't feel bad now if I don't attend events. Like, there have been events where, again, this was before I got vaccinated, where a friend of ours, a mutual friend, hosted an event, and I didn't realize how many people this person invited. And it was way beyond my comfort zone, to the point where I left. But I didn't feel bad. Whereas before, that people pleaser in me be like, oh my God, are they upset that I left? Like, I'm just going to stay because they'll be upset if I leave. But now, if I don't want to go to an event, or if I'm not comfortable with the safety protocols maybe that a restaurant is doing, I leave and I don't feel bad. And I think that that's been a nice paradigm shift for me post-pandemic.
Well, it sounds like that's another one of those gifts. It gave us permission to actually voice what we want and what we don't want.
Because I think people are more understanding. And I think that understanding wasn't there, or maybe available, or as present as it is now.
So have you taken meetings and done other things in person, or are you still doing mostly virtual?
Well, most of my colleagues are international, so no, I don't. I do Zoom. Everything is through Zoom, which I like a lot, because I get to wear running shorts and be comfortable. I think and I just really enjoy my space. Like, you and I were talking about this before we started recording today, which is like, I feel like I am most creative like at my house, or just like when the energy moves me. And as soon as I remember when we had the executive office suites, and I would walk in, as soon as I walked in, I was like, I don't want to be here. And my job hasn't necessarily changed, but my space has. And so, coming back to the story that I shared, earlier about forcing people to go back to where they don't want to go, it's not the person, it's the place that makes people, I feel, sometimes like not be as productive. Not to say that it can't be the person, but you know what I mean.
Well, environment's huge, right? You want to make sure that you're having a space that is comfortable, that you can feel like you have some control in different things. And this reminds me of our guest, Lee Chambers, when he was talking about this environment, right? If you're in a place where the fan is constantly click, 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 and it's driving you nuts, well, that environment is affecting your ability to focus.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think people knowing that, and also just knowing, hey, if maybe I don't want to be around these many people anymore. Or, we've gone to some places and I'm just like, I'm blown away at large crowds right now. Not that I'm uncomfortable, but I'm just blown away with them because it's like, there's still stuff going on. Like, it's not like it's gone. It's not totally eradicated. And it's something where, like, I think that's probably my next step is what large event with lots of people am I going to be comfortable with? I think it's going to be the plays before anything else. But it's still, going through the airport. It's like, where are all these people going? Don't they know there's things happening? Why? It's like, and, Matt will turn to me. They're doing the same thing we are. They're going somewhere. It's like, thanks. Thanks for that, honey.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the topic was just really interesting for me because as things are getting to quote unquote, I don't like to use the word normal, post pandemic mode, the PPM, it's just different. I mean, I look at these little micro gifts that were given to us by the pandemic and just it never would have happened I shouldn't say never, who knows, right? Mm-hmm. But I can definitely tell you Pug Productions would not be around.
Agreed.
The podcast, who knows?
The podcast, probably not. I don't know. Probably not because I found the coaching during the like actual lockdown. The first time that we had that. I mean, we really only had one lockdown in Nevada. But I would just say for anybody who's out there, slowly figuring out that they can go back out into the wild, take your time, figure out what your comfort zone is. Because, it took us a little bit before we started not wearing masks in public. And even then that felt a little bit weird because, you feel that judgment. It's like, oh, are you not vaccinated? It's like, well, no, I'm vaccinated.
I like that you said, like, what are you comfortable with? Because once you understand what you're comfortable with, then you can start to set those boundaries in terms of what your PPM is going to look like. And you're going to stay firm to those boundaries. And I know that when I talk about boundaries, City gets real excited because this is like her thing.
I love boundaries. But this is a different kind of boundary because this has to do with your physical safety and health. And so knowing what is that comfort level for you and being respectful of that for yourself and for others, because there's still a lot of unknowns out there. There's still a bunch of other crap you can get that has nothing to do with COVID, right? So you still want to be aware and still do some of these things. I think just even the hand washing habit that we developed, right? Of like, we had it before, but like we really honed in on it in this last year and a half, right? It's like, oh, okay. Now we can do a couple other things. And even in this PPM, right? The ability to travel again, like that one, I'm so excited about that one. Being able to do things.
I know that you talked about the physical safety. I'm always looking at creating like emotionally safe spaces. And I think that that's what drives a lot of my decisions in terms of, am I going to meet up with certain people? Emotionally, do I feel safe with the situation? Do I feel safe with the physical space? Like all of that. How, if I'm noticing tension in my body about a certain activity or with certain conduct that maybe an institution, an organization's doing, I go off of my gut. Mm-hmm. and I leave, I set boundaries, and you just got to stick with those boundaries, PPM.
Yes, definitely stick with the PPM. But there was one thing that I know you'd wanted to talk about, which was, what about those relationships? What about those relationships that maybe due to time and distance fizzled out a little bit? How do you reapproach those in this PPM?
I mean, I touched on it a little bit in terms of being able to go out. Like I talk about meeting up with our friend Jen, but I think it's also just like I've been trying to be more mindfully and intentional with reaching out. So I had texted my brother, Megan, who was also a previous guest of ours. And so he and I FaceTime briefly this morning. And it's just even sending quick audio notes. Like I'm not a big, I don't really like talking on the phone or anything like that. So, but if I can send you a quick voice note, letting you know that I'm thinking of you, that seems to have gone a long way with people, because I think that we don't check in necessarily unless it's within our immediate family. So I think taking that time to say, hey, I'm thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. Let's schedule a time to connect, and I'll hop on a FaceTime or something like that. So that's kind of how I started to reconnect with individuals. What about you?
I took your lead And so when I walked in this morning and you were on the phone with your brother, I was like, well, I want to talk to my brothers too. So I texted both of them and just kind of had like a little quick conversation. And then my little brother went ahead and called me, which was like, well, okay, since he rarely calls, I took the call. Otherwise I would have been like, I'm very busy podcasting. I'm a content creator. Like, hello,
obviously, hi.
Leave me alone. But no, it was really nice to do that. And I got some news that I'm not going to share because it's not my news to share until he starts telling people. But it was nice to just chat for a little bit and do that. It's like, oh, okay, you can do it the way you want. And I think more than anything during this last year and a half, I've learned that I want certain relationships to be different or maybe stay the same, and that's okay. And that I really have not necessarily control, but I have a say in how I want those things to go. So if I want a better relationship with my brothers, guess what? Like, I can try to do that just by contacting them, just texting them, sending them a quick message, just like, hey, was just thinking about you. Hope you're having a good Sunday. And if they want to pick up the baton, great. And if they don't, I did what I want to do, which is reach out to them to have better relationships.
It sounds nice. I'm glad I, helped you inspire you,
You do inspire me a lot. I try not to compliment her that much though, because then I'll never hear the end of it. And it's not, I'm not sure why it's a life sentence, guys. I would love some insight on that. Anyone? Bueller. But yeah, so I think even some of the like work relationships or colleagues and things like that, I think little by little as groups start feeling more comfortable to do things, I'm going to participate more in those things because I like it. And I realized, okay, you know what? I do miss it, but I still get to decide, why am I going? And so it was interesting because I went to a luncheon this last week with a new group that I actually got connected with during the pandemic. I didn't know about them beforehand. So this was my first event with them. And as I was getting ready, I was like, why am I going to this? Like, I literally asked myself that question. It's like, why are you going? It's like, because I want to connect with other local Latin women. It's like, okay, that was enough for me. And so I think knowing my why as to why I was participating, because I was kind of dragging my feet a little bit. And I was like, oh, I'm going out. It's hot. Like, why did I do this? Like, I wasn't thinking. And I was like, no, you wanted to do this for a reason. You have to think about what's that reason that you decided to RSVP for this thing. Because it wasn't a last minute event. It was something that you planned to do. So I think all of us have to really just be intentional about, well, why am I spending my time here? Why did I say yes to this event? Why did I say no to this particular coffee or lunch? Like, and just really check in with ourselves so that way we are making decisions that are intentional and aligned with how we want to be.
Well, and I think prior to the pandemic, you and I have both shared on this podcast how our calendars, we would just pack our calendars as much as we could with everything that we could, never having time for ourselves. Then we talked about the pandemic pause, where obviously life stopped, everything closed, and it would really allow the time and space for introspection and really trying to chisel out where's my energy lying? What do I need to be doing? Am I doing what I'm being called to do in life? And I think that also pertains to relationships. I think about all the happy hours we would go to, all the money I would spend, all the time I was out of this house, but was it doing things that nourished me? And I can't say that all of it was. So I think the pandemic also kind of sifted the good relationships or the meaningful relationships for maybe the ones that weren't. And so now I'm being more intentional and contacting or staying connected with those relationships that do feed me, my brother being one of them. So I think it's just maybe helped highlight or identify the relationships I do want to nurture.
I think there was like you said, a sifting of a lot of things in our lives, of things that we wanted to maybe get away from and didn't know how. And so now we had this opportunity, but now in this PPM, there's going to be these expectations that you go back to doing all the things that you were doing before. And so I want to caution anybody who's thinking that they have to go back to how things were before. You do not.
Nope.
Nope, not at all. You do not need to live into anybody's else expectations. What you need to do is do things that are for you and know that that is okay. It's not being selfish. It's preserving yourself. And that's important because we want your greatness.
We want to hear from you. What are you most looking forward to in this PPM? Let us know on our Instagram or our private Facebook group, Pivotal Moments HQ. We want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR production.